The desert sun bled across the horizon like a wounded beast, pouring fire over the mesas, canyons, and ragged hills of the frontier. Dust hung in the air, thick as smoke, turning every breath dry and every blink heavy. It was a land that made or broke men. A land where steel nerves and grit weren't a choice, but the only way to wake up alive come morning. Clayton Reeves knew this well. At 42, he had lived more years alone on the Reeves Ranch than he cared to count. The place sprawled 50 miles west of Abilene, 300 acres of scrub, cedar, and grassland too stubborn to die. A white-washed farmhouse, patched more with sweat and spare planks than money, leaned at its center. 4 horses, a dozen cows, and 3 working dogs were his companions. And yet, despite all he had built with calloused hands and worn boots, the silence gnawed at him. He had been a husband once. A father, too. But the cholera epidemic 6 years back had taken his wife and his boy, leaving only him, the ranch, and the quiet creak of wind through the rafters. Since then, men in town called him the Ghost Rancher, not for anything supernatural, but because he lived like a man already dead, drifting through the motions. It was in this state that Clayton came across the poster. Pinned to the bulletin board outside Thompson's General Store, the paper was half, torn by wind and faded from the sun, but the words burned clear. Wives for sale. $1. Speak to Sheriff Mathers for arrangements. He had heard whispers of it before. Poor families selling daughters to settle debts or keep from starving. A grim practice, but not uncommon in a land where law traveled slower than hunger. Most men shook their heads and muttered disgust. Others, lonely or desperate, saw it as a chance. Clayton didn't stop to question his own reaction. He simply tore the paper down, folded it in his vest, and rode to the sheriff's office. What the town of Copper Creek was no more than a dusty strip of buildings with sunburned paint, a saloon, a blacksmith, a church, 2 stores, and the sheriff's office with a single iron, barred cell. By the time Clayton tied his horse outside, the streets were alive with the usual Saturday noise, drunken laughter, boots stomping the porch boards, piano notes leaking from behind swinging saloon doors. Sheriff Mathers looked up from behind his desk when Clayton stepped inside. Mathers was a stocky man with thinning hair, spectacles perched low on his nose, and a revolver that looked far too clean for how little he used it. "Reeves," he said, scratching his chin. "Been a while since you rode into town. What brings you here?" Clayton tossed the paper on his desk. "That poster. I want to see her." Mathers' brows rose. "You serious?" Clayton's jaw worked. "I wouldn't be here if I weren't." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, studying him. "You know what you're asking for. Ain't no happy endings in these dealings. Folks sell daughters 'cause they can't feed 'em, not 'cause they want better for 'em. You take her, you're taking her whole damn sorrow along with it." Clayton's eyes darkened. "I've carried worse." For a long moment, only the flies buzzing around the oil lamp filled the room. Then Mathers sighed, rose, and pushed through the back door. "Come on, then." She was sitting on the bench in the holding room, hands folded tight in her lap, hair hanging down like a curtain of black silk streaked with dust. Her dress was plain cotton, faded blue, the hem frayed and dirt-stained. She couldn't have been more than 20, though her face bore the hollow look of someone who'd been fighting hunger longer than she'd been fighting years. When she raised her eyes, Clayton saw something that stopped him, a defiance burning through the wariness, like a candle refusing to snuff out. "This him?" she asked, voice raw. Mathers nodded. "Clayton Reeves. Rancher, lives west." Her gaze slid back to Clayton. "Please." She swallowed hard, her throat working. "Just make it quick." The Clayton frowned. "What?" "I don't want to suffer," she whispered. "If you're gonna do whatever men like you do, just make it quick." The words hit him like a horse's kick to the ribs. Clayton straightened, jaw tight. "I didn't come here for that." The girl blinked, confusion breaking through her guarded expression. Mathers cleared his throat awkwardly. "Her folks sold her yesterday. $1, signed and sealed. Name's Eliza Ward. Mother gone, father deep in debt, brothers scattered. She's got no place to go. If you take her, she's yours. By law." Clayton reached into his vest, pulled out a single silver dollar, and laid it on the desk. The coin gleamed under the lamplight. "I'll take her," he said. Eliza's lips parted. eyes darting between the sheriff and the rancher. "Why?" she asked softly. Clayton turned, meeting her gaze full on. "Because no one deserves to be bought like cattle. And I'm done eating my meals alone." The ride back to the ranch was silent, except for the clop of hooves and the whisper of wind through the mesquite. Eliza roadside, saddle behind Clayton on his chestnut mare, her hands clutched nervously to his coat. He could feel the tremor in her touch, the wariness in every breath she drew. The land stretched endless before them, ridges of ochre stone, rivers reduced to thin silver threads, scattered herds of antelope fleeing at the sound of hoofbeats. Coyotes yipped somewhere far off. The horizon swallowed the sun until only streaks of purple and red lingered in the sky. At last, the ranch house came into view. It stood lonely against the plain, roof patched with tin, porch sagging, but the smoke curling from its chimney promised warmth. "This is it," Clayton said as he dismounted. He offered his hand. "Ain't much, but it's home." Eliza slid down, hesitating before touching the ground, like she expected the earth itself to give way. She looked at the house, then at him. "You really ain't gonna hurt me?" Clayton's gaze softened. "Not unless you count puttin' you to work. Ranch don't run itself." Something flickered in her eyes, caution giving way, just slightly, to disbelief. That night, she sat at his kitchen table, staring at a steaming plate of beans, cornbread, and salted pork. Her hands hovered over the food like she wasn't sure if it was real. "Go on," Clayton said, lowering himself into the chair across from her. "Ain't poisoned." She ate slow at first, then faster, hunger overwhelming her hesitation. Clayton watched in silence, sipping black coffee, listening to the scrape of fork on tin plate. When she finally leaned back, full for the first time in who knew how long, she whispered, "Thank you." Clayton nodded. "You'll earn it. Chores start at sunrise." For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. But Copper Creek was a small town, and small towns breed big mouths. By morning, whispers had already spread. The ghost rancher bought himself a wife for $1. Poor girl don't know what she's in for. Reeves must be desperate, or dangerous. And not all the whispers stayed whispers. Some men, smelling blood in the water, figured a girl sold for $1 could be stolen just as cheap. And soon, Clayton Reeves would find himself facing more than loneliness. He would face the outlaw fire that always comes when men think they can take what isn't theirs. The sun had barely broken the horizon when Clayton Reeves rose from his bed. The boards of the old ranch house creaked under his boots as he moved to the window. Outside, the sky blazed orange and pink, streaked with clouds that promised no rain. The land was thirsty, brittle. The cattle would wander far today in search of water. Behind him, he heard the faint rustle of blankets. Eliza stirred in the small room across the hall, where he'd set up a cot for her. He'd left her space, respecting her silence. He knew trust was slower to grow than grass in drought. By the time he stepped onto the porch, hat pulled low, she was already outside, sleeves rolled, a pail in each hand. "You're up early," Clayton said. Her eyes flicked toward him, guarded but steady. "Work starts at sunrise, you said." "I've been up before." He gave a short nod. There was steel in her voice, the kind forged by years of scraping survival out of the dirt. He respected it. The two worked in silence that morning. She hauled water, tended the chickens, and tried her hand at milking. He saddled the horses, rode the perimeter, and returned to mend a broken fence rail. Now and then, he caught her watching him, curious, cautious, like she was still measuring who he truly was. But by noon, the peace shattered. 3 riders came down the trail, dust kicking high behind them. Clayton spotted them first, his hand tightening around the hammer of his revolver. They weren't townsfolk. He knew that quick. Their horses were lean and restless, their clothes dust, caked but trimmed with stolen silver buckles and bandanas pulled low. Guns hung easy at their hips. Eliza froze on the porch, eyes widening. "Ooh." "Inside," Clayton said flatly. "But, now." The sharpness in his voice sent her hurrying into the house. Clayton stayed where he was, stepping down off the porch, boots planted in the dirt. He didn't draw, not yet. 3 against 1 wasn't odds he liked. But this was his land. The lead rider pulled up first, a wary man with sharp features and eyes like rattlesnake glass. He grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "Afternoon, Reeves," he drawled. "Heard you picked yourself up something new." Thought we'd ride out, pay respects. Clayton's jaw tightened. Don't believe we're acquainted. The man tipped his hat mockingly. Name's Virgil Kane. These boys are mine. We've been known to collect what others misplace. His eyes flicked to the house. Word in Copper Creek says you bought yourself a girl. Dollar deal. That right? Clayton's voice was steel. She's not for sale. Virgil's grin widened. Hell, everything's for sale, Reeves. Especially women. You think $1 keeps her yours? We'll give you 5, cash. Clayton's hand hovered near his revolver. Turn your horses. Ride on. The outlaws chuckled. One spat tobacco into the dust. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of violence waiting to break. Virgil leaned in the saddle, voice low. Don't be a fool, rancher. You can't fight the whole damn world. A girl like that, she's a prize, and we take prizes. Clayton's eyes narrowed. You cross that porch, you die. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Virgil chuckled, reined his horse back, and spat into the dirt. Not today, he said, tipping his hat again. But you'll see us soon. Can't hold the tide back forever, Reeves. They wheeled their horses and rode off, leaving a trail of dust and the stench of menace behind. Clayton stood silent, muscles taut, until the riders disappeared over the ridge. Only then did he breathe. When he turned, Eliza stood in the doorway, pale but steady. They'll be back, won't they? She asked. Clayton met her eyes. Yes. That night, after supper, the silence weighed heavier than ever. Eliza sat across from him at the table, her hands folded, knuckles white. Finally, she spoke. Why didn't you just let them take me? Clayton stared at her, stunned. What? You barely know me. You don't owe me anything. They'd have left you alone. His jaw worked, struggling with the words. Because I've buried enough family. I ain't burying what's under my roof again. Something shifted in her expression. Uncertainty giving way to something raw, something that flickered between gratitude and fear. She whispered. You don't even know who I am? I know enough, he said. Days turned into weeks. They worked the ranch side by side, the rhythm of survival binding them. Slowly, Eliza softened. She laughed once, brief but real, when a goat chased her across the yard. She hummed while hanging wash on the line. She asked questions, about the ranch, about his late wife, about the stars over the plains. But the shadow of Virgil Kane hung always near. And then came the day Copper Creek erupted. Clayton rode into town for supplies, leaving Eliza with the dogs. By mid-afternoon, the air inside the saloon was thick with whiskey and cigar smoke. He bought flour, coffee, nails, and was about to leave when shouting erupted down the street. He stepped out, hand instinctively on his revolver. Virgil Kane and his men stood outside the saloon, guns drawn, smoke curling from the barrels. Sheriff Mathers lay in the dirt, clutching his side, blood pooling fast. Clayton's chest went cold. You son of a... He started, but Kane's men spotted him. Reeves. Bullets cracked the air. Clayton dove behind a water trough, wood splintering around him. Townsfolk screamed, scattering. He fired back twice, sending one outlaw spinning into the dust. But the others pressed hard. The sheriff groaned, dragging himself toward cover. Reeves, don't let get the girl. Clayton's blood surged hot. Eliza. Alone on the ranch. He fought his way through the chaos, lead whizzing past, the thunder of guns shaking the street. One man dropped, then another. Kane cursed, calling his men back. Reeves, he shouted over the din. You think you can keep her? We'll burn that ranch to the ground. She's ours. And then they were gone, thundering out of town. Clayton ran to Mathers, pressing a hand to his wound. Hold on. The sheriff coughed, blood on his lips. Stop them, before they reach her. Clayton's gut turned to stone. He mounted his horse, spurred hard, and rode like hellfire itself chased him. The trail home blurred. Every hoofbeat a drum in his chest. The sun dipped low, bleeding across the horizon. He prayed with each mile that he wouldn't see smoke rising, that he wouldn't hear the screams of dogs cut short. When he crested the final ridge, his heart seized. The ranch house stood, but figures circled it. Horses, men, lanterns flickered. He saw Eliza on the porch, back pressed to the door, a shotgun clutched in trembling hands. And Virgil Kane, grinning in the dust, waiting. Clayton's rage boiled over. He drew his revolver and spurred his horse straight into the fire. What followed was chaos. Gunfire lit the dusk. Men shouted, horses reared. Clayton's shots cracked true, dropping two before his boots even hit the ground. Eliza fired the shotgun, sending another sprawling into the dirt. The dogs lunged, teeth flashing. Virgil Kane moved through the storm like a serpent, his revolver spitting death. "Reeves," he roared. "You can't keep her. She's mine." Clayton answered with steel. They faced each other in the yard, the world narrowing to two men, two guns, and the space of a heartbeat. The draw was fast. Too fast to think. Two shots rang out. Dust exploded. Virgil staggered, clutching his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. He fell to his knees, then to the dirt, the gold tooth catching one last glint of dying light. The yard fell silent, save for the labored breathing of horses and the crackle of flames licking from a fallen lantern. The remaining outlaws fled into the night, leaving their leader behind. Clayton lowered his gun, chest heaving. Eliza stood frozen on the porch, shotgun hanging limp at her side. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, eyes locked on him. You saved me," she whispered. Clayton met her gaze, the weight of all his loneliness pressing hard. "No, you saved yourself. I just stood my ground." She looked at him for a long, unbroken moment. Then tears welled in her eyes, not of fear, not of despair, but of release, like a soul finally let free from its chains. And in that silence, under the blood red sky of the Wild West, two broken lives began to stitch themselves back together.